All right, back in the basement again today to give you guys my first initial impressions on these Pépin Fast Series dumbbells. I've been getting a ton of questions about these ever since it was announced that they'd be released, and then I said I'd be getting a pair. And especially the last 2 weeks as I've been posting some teaser videos of them in use and capturing B-roll of them since receiving them shortly before Christmas. So I want to give you guys my general impressions on these. Now this video is going to be kind of more from the hip, meaning that I don't have a set talk track in place like all my videos, but I'm going to try to timestamp stuff and hopefully talk in somewhat of a logical manner. That way, if you want to jump to a specific aspect of these dumbbells that I'm going to talk about, you can do that. And if you don't want the context of why I think these might be a great fit for me particularly, you can skip that stuff as well. So that being said, they are announced, I believe, in like September or October for pre-order. David Pépin, the owner, reached out to me and said, would you be interested in being one of the first people to review these dumbbells? And I said, yes. And I said that for a couple of reasons. Number one, you guys know me. I like a lot of cool gym stuff, probably more so than I need. And then number two, I've actually been considering expanding my existing dumbbell set, which you can see behind me, to heavier dumbbells. So for some brief market context for myself, my own buying criteria, behind me I have a set of Rep Fitness urethane fixed dumbbells from 5 to 100 pounds. They've been great. Don't use them a ton necessarily in my training because a lot of it is more barbell focused, but having a set of dumbbells from 5 to 100 has been fantastic, especially in fixed form, because I can grab whatever I want, whenever I want, and not have to change plates in and out. I also have them living in a Sorinex Iron Bear, which is also a fantastic addition to my gym, which has the dumbbell cradles and all that. It fits really nicely. It looks really cool with the 3x3, 1-inch hardware, powder coat white. But it also holds up to 8 barbells, has a medicine ball shelf, as well as holding some other stuff on there. It holds all my lever belts and chains and a lot of other things. I love that piece. But in my kind of inquiries into building that out and adding more dumbbells, in order to get the 105 to 125 pound dumbbell set from Rep, that would cost me $2,700. And then in order to add another shelf to the Sorinex Iron Bear, which I would need to fit 5 more pairs of dumbbells, that would cost me roughly around $1,200. So all in to go from 100-pound dumbbells up to a set of 125 dumbbells, it's going to cost me around $4,000. Pretty expensive, which is probably one of the reasons why I've been hesitant to do so, because again, they would probably be used more as assistance exercises for me and not something I would use as much as a barbell and normal Olympic style plate. So when David reached out to me and said, hey, I might have a solution that's going to give you what you want, be much more affordable at $1,700 for a 20 to 120 pound set, more on that later, and taking up a very little footprint where you don't have to buy an extra shelf or anything like that. That's one of the biggest reasons I was interested in doing so. The third reason is he offered to send these to me at no cost, which a lot of times I get offered stuff for free and I just say no thanks because I don't think I'll need it or do I want it. In this case, this was something that was right up my alley, so big thanks to Pépin for that, but don't think they will be spared of anything of negatives because although these dumbbells so far the first 2 weeks has been great, I do think there is some room for improvement, which I know David is open for and he's looking to implement into future revisions of this Fast Series dumbbell. So that's kind of a little bit of my own context for buying. Let's talk about what else my experience has been with adjustable dumbbells. So I have fixed dumbbells now, as I mentioned, but it hasn't always been the case. You guys might recall a video from several years ago, which is one of my most popular videos on the Iron Master adjustable dumbbells. They use kind of this combination of a spin lock, but it's a quick spin lock. And I have a video saying that those are the best adjustable dumbbells for most people when you're looking for something that goes super heavy, looking for something that feels like a dumbbell, and looking for something that can take a beating. The big downside to those, however, were the fact that it just wasn't fun to adjust. Now, for me personally, it wasn't a huge deal, but I did find that over time, I just got lazy and didn't want to have to go and adjust them because while they were quicker than a traditional spin lock style, they still took some time and I ended up either not using them or just leaving them on the heaviest weight possible and only doing exercises that required that particular weight. I also made a video about a year ago talking about the NuoBell dumbbells, which kind of alleviated all that slow adjustment time and gave you some of the quickest adjustment around. Still felt like a real dumbbell because the shape was the same and it wasn't like a power block or anything like that. The downside of those was that it was made of a lot of plastic, so there's a lot of concern of their durability, which I can say as of right now, the person who currently owns them, who lives down the street from me, hasn't had any issues that I'm aware of. but they were also limited to only 80 pounds and there was no expandability on them. So when these fast series were announced, it was basically a blending of the two, right? You get some of the heavy duty aspects of the Ironmaster, but you're getting the quick adjustability of the NuoBells, and it really seemed in theory like a match made in heaven. So that's why my expectations of this were very high. But I was really skeptical because these are completely made of steel. There is no plastic on these outside of maybe in the cradle where the dumbbell rests. Other than that, you're looking at all steel construction, which I thought could either be great or could be pretty bad in the fact that they could be very utilitarian, barbarian-like in terms of their build quality. And I was worried about how this adjustment mechanism would actually end up working. But I gotta say, I've been really impressed so far in the initial 2 weeks of it. So that brings us to now, these dumbbells. Let's talk a little bit about them. First, let's talk about the basic specs. I mentioned, or at least I think I mentioned, that these cost $1,700 for the 20 to 120 pound set. Price-wise, the feedback I've gotten from a lot of people have been, wow, that's really expensive. But I've been trying to answer that question with my own context of you have to realize what you're getting with these and with any adjustable dumbbell. I don't think many people actually go out and price fixed dumbbells. So for example, I mentioned already I was looking at these as a way to kind of get me from that 105 to 125 range. But if I was looking at these versus my current setup and the 125 range setup, there is a vast price difference. So first of all, these retail for $1,700, go from 20 to 120 pounds. Just going from 105 to 125 with Rep Fitness would have been $2,700. To go from the 5 to 100 pound set I have now, I believe the cost is $5,000, right around there. It might be $4,000. I think all in just for a dumbbell set from 5 to 125 from Rep would cost me $8,700. And then again, talking about throwing in the Sorinex and the storage on top of it, the solution behind me would kind of balloon to like an $11,000 solution or potentially even more, depending on the bells and whistles I got with the Iron Bear, as opposed to something like this, which comes in at $1,700. So again, just talking dumbbell to dumbbell here, $1,700 versus $8,700. And the footprint of this is like 2x2 as opposed to taking up basically a whole half of a wall in my basement. This setup is huge behind me. It takes up a ton of space. So in context, I think the value is potentially there. Now I mentioned things like Iron Masters and stuff like that already. For an Iron Master set, which I believe goes up to like 120 or 130 pounds, so you're getting the base set plus the add-on extension sets, I believe those retail right now for $1,100. So about $600 cheaper. But at least with the Pépins, what you're getting is that quick adjustability, which a lot of people kind of crave. So again, looking in context in the market, you can see the value. I think the Pro style Power Blocks, which I have not used, but a lot of people like Power Blocks. I just never like the feel of any Power Blocks, let alone Power Block Pros, which for the 120 set, I believe retails for $1,800. Those are more expensive. So again, $1,700 is an investment for a lot of people, but when you take it into context of what else you could potentially be getting, this could be a good option for you. Now, of course, there's spin lock and stuff and where you can use your own weights. I actually have some of the Pépin HD series, which I'm looking off to here on my left, which I owe you guys a video on still, but I wanted to focus on the fast series for this video. So pricing wise, I think this is a fair price considering what you get. Now, as I mentioned already too, these are built completely out of steel, and I actually have been pleasantly surprised with how they've worked, meaning that the basic construction is what you get here is you get a handle in the middle, obviously, that weighs 20 pounds. So if I lift it up, and I'll show you some B-roll throughout the course of this video, this is roughly a 20-pound handle. Now I say roughly because when I weigh this out, it's just under 21 pounds. After talking with David over at Pépin, David Pépin, if you will, I could probably cut to the chase and just say that for the future rest of this video. He said he made some changes to the handle that it actually increased the weight just slightly. So initially this was a 20-pound handle, and now it's about 21 pounds. So as I talk about how this compares to other fixed dumbbells, these tend to be about 1 pound over the stated weight. But that's why when I say that this dumbbell goes from 20 to 120 or even to 130 when that new release comes up, because that's in the pipeline as well, It starts at a higher weight. So if you're looking for a 10-pound dumbbell, a 5-pound dumbbell, these do not do it for you. It's just the way that everything's built in here. The handles start at 20 pounds and it goes up to 120. When they are released for the 130-pound variant, I believe the only thing that changes is the handle itself gets heavier. And I say that versus adding on more plates because this particular handle, the way that it works with the guide rail, which I'll show you in a second, would have to be longer in order to accommodate more plates, which means the handle length would potentially be longer as well in the given system. Speaking about the given system, let's talk about how this thing works. I mentioned already you have the handle in the middle, obviously. You then have a series of plates on either side of this cradle. Each plate weighs 5 pounds. It also has this small metal piece that's bolted onto the front of it. This metal piece would then lock into the next plate in the row. Again, I'll hopefully show you appropriate B-roll, I should say, to show you how that works exactly. And then you would then add weight. You need to add weight on both sides if you want the dumbbell to be where you want it in terms of an even number. So on the guide rails, which are on either side of the handle, it has numbers from 20 all the way up to 120. The process to adjust these is super simple. You go to one side, pop the pin, or you can pull it, or you can just push it from the back like I'm doing here. You then slide it to the according weight on the corresponding side. Let's just say, for example, 50 pounds, and you click it in. You then come to the other side, 50 pounds, click it in. And what happens is there's a guide rail within this handle part that comes out and will basically hold that amount of weight in place, in addition to it being locked in at the top. And when you take the dumbbell out, you have them all locked together. So there's a couple of ways that this should, in theory, not fail. Number one, the railing is holding the weights together, as well as the locking pads in place. So both would really have to fail for one of these plates to potentially fail on you. That being said, again, this is made of all steel. So the plates themselves that are interlocking, whereas with something with a NuoBell, you see a lot of plastic here, you actually have metal that's coated in black zinc. So it gives this thing a really mean look and also helps add to its beefiness as well. Now, in terms of adjusting and how this works, I mentioned you pop one side out, you adjust to the weight that's appropriate, and you push the pin in. I was kind of doing it in a more controlled fashion to show you that, but like, let's say for instance, it's on 50 right now and I wanted to go to 120. It's now set for 120 pounds. I would lift it up, but I'm standing and basically doing a front raise with 120 pounds in one hand. I like to consider myself strong, not that strong, but I'll show you some B-roll of that working correctly. So let's say we did 120 pounds and we want to do a drop set. We put it back in the cradle. Or drop back down. So again, super simple, super fast to adjust. I like it a lot. And to be honest, you don't have to use the cradle to do this, but the problem is the weight at the ends that you're not using are going to either probably fall to the left or to the right. So obviously the cradle and putting this somewhere where it's easy to access makes the most sense. But in theory, you could do this without the cradle. It just isn't recommended. Other things about this, the cradle itself, like I mentioned, it does have some UHMW on the bottom. It has Pépin laser cut in. It looks really nice. A lot of stuff is lasered in on it, so the numbers that are on the guide rails are lasered in. It's not like a sticker like you might see with something like Power Blocks or something like that. On the inside of the handles, there are 2 plates. One of them actually shows the lot number, if you will, of this. I got number 2 out of 500, so very lucky to have that. And again, David's been great with me in reaching out and asking if I'd be one of the first to review this. And he asked if he could have a copy of my logo so that he could put it in on the handle. So I have my own customized Pépin Fast Series dumbbells, which again, I think are really, really cool. Some other things I think are really cool of this are the handle itself. So I mentioned already, it starts at 20 pounds, 21 if you want to be specific. But the handle and grip is great. I told you I owed you a video on the Pépin HD series dumbbells. One of the things I like most about those are their big, beefy handles with good knurling. And the knurling and handle on this does not disappoint either. So it's 34.5 millimeters. So it's a big boy grip. If you take a look at the actual knurling, it is cut very well. It's on the higher density side. If you're into the TPI or LPI type numbers, I would equate it very much to the sizing of a Kabuki power bar. However, it's not as mountainous. So these are slight volcanoes. The tops are not fully peaked, and it just doesn't feel as cut as deep. But for a dumbbell, it is fantastic. So I'm going to show you a picture of the Pépin Fast Series dumbbell with a side-by-side comparison of the Rep Fitness urethane dumbbells behind me, which are still great. And again, for perfect for dumbbell use and everyday stuff. Typically, people don't want really aggro-style knurl on dumbbells, but this is definitely a step up. Speaking of a step up, although this is an all-steel construction, the handles on here are electroless nickel, so very, very high quality overall. Speaking of high quality, one of the questions that I get asked most frequently, besides how much do these cost, is can you drop them? So I've already posted a YouTube short, which I don't know if many people watch YouTube shorts. I tend to skip over them, but I know a lot of people like that short form content. Posted this on Instagram as well of me doing what I call a drop test. And I want to address that. And first, let me show you the footage of that right now. I'll insert it in editing. But I want to talk about it because one of the comments, or some of the comments I got about it is, that's not a real drop test. And I'm going to agree to disagree here. Because what I wanted to do is test these dumbbells out like how I would use my normal fixed dumbbells, which means any drop for me is still going to be a controlled drop. I like to take care of my equipment, and even in a commercial gym setting, I do not throw the dumbbells on the ground. Like, I control the drop, and that's what I did with these. I used these in a real world scenario, and they held up fantastic. I think the heaviest I went is like 105 or 110s on some chest presses with the drops. So I don't think I loaded it out to 120, but I don't see why 120 would be that much different from 110 or 30 that much different from 100. These held up really well in the type of drop that I do at home. And to combat what someone might say is, well, you should have done an overhead drop is, I don't think so. There's never a scenario in the world where I would drop these overhead. And although they might very well stand up to that kind of abuse like the Iron Masters would, it's not realistic. In fact, I could take a lot of pieces of here in my gym, from barbells to plates to whatever, and if I drop them overhead, or if I try to break them, chances are I can probably succeed. So I'm not trying to break these necessarily to see what their breaking point is. I'm testing these to see if they would hold up to normal everyday wear and tear as I use dumbbells, and these have so far. And if they don't, one of the nice things about these from Pépin is that they have a lifetime warranty. So I believe Stray Dog Strength, if you're not familiar with them, is an equipment manufacturer in the US. I think they've been in talks about potentially carrying these because these are a Canadian-made product. So they take a little bit longer to come, but I didn't really have any issues with that. They've been talking with Pépin, I believe, to potentially carry these in the States to kind of cut down on some of that extra leg work. And I believe they've been doing drop tests from like waist high, which again, I still would never do, but they have held up fine. But again, lifetime warranty on this. And again, it's fully steel. So chances are it's going to break your floor before it breaks these dumbbells potentially. So I've really liked these in my limited use with them, and I'm hoping to answer a lot of the questions that you have. As I mentioned, however, though, these aren't necessarily perfect. There's some things that I find a little bit tricky, annoying, or maybe I'd like to see changed. The first of which is, speaking of the handle itself, while generally speaking, this dumbbell feels like a real dumbbell in hand, it works well. The guide rails, if you tend to rotate your wrists at all, which doesn't happen all the time, but even just like placing these dumbbells here or there or moving them around, you might not have a straight on grip every time. You could potentially hit your wrist on the guide rails, which could become a problem, number one, if you have weak wrists, but also if you wear watches on your hands, you could line up right with where that watch screen is and potentially damage it. It is kind of the belly of the beast, if you will. I think that's the saying. It's probably not. Someone will correct me in the comment section below. It is what it is, but it's just something that, it's not ideal, but it's one of the downsides of these particular dumbbells. Also, with the actual plates themselves, these things are not round, which is nice, so they won't roll. They don't really have really hard edges here in terms of their shape, but there are some flat sides, which means you can place them and they won't roll. I know that was a complaint on some other quick adjusting dumbbells that are rounded. However, the lips of these is pretty much a 90-degree angle. It's not something that's super sharp as is, fingering it now, wrap your mind around that statement. But when these are resting on something or they're moving and it's loaded to 120 pounds, it could be slightly uncomfortable. Speaking of something that wasn't necessarily uncomfortable, which I thought it would be, is resting these on my knees. Because again, on the end of these, you have the locking plates, and there is some edges on those as well, and it's not completely flat, which is one of the reasons that I liked, the Iron Masters. They had a big round, flat item on the end where it covered a lot of your leg. I thought these would be uncomfortable to have on my legs, especially when they were loaded up to over 100 pounds. I didn't really find it to be off-putting, to be honest, But that being said, depending on future use cases, it might be nice if these had like an end cap. And then that way it was like a flat design, or you could even do a padded design if someone was into it. So you have the potential to maybe do that because, again, there is a locking plate on here. The downside to that would be, number one, it might potentially add to the weight of the dumbbell. But also, from a production standpoint, right now, all these plates are identical. There's nothing different about them, so you could mix and match them and do whatever you want, and the dumbbells would still work the same because, again, each one's 5 pounds. Each one on one side has a male end. On the back end has a female end. I got nervous talking about putting it into the female end. So they, in theory, would have to kind of change some of their production, and it's just an extra step. It's not necessary, but it might be nice to potentially see that. But overall, I have been very happy with these. I'm going to continue to use these. And for the time being, I don't see myself going the extra route of getting the 125-pound dumbbell set, spending the extra money. These have been great overall. The only other downside I could potentially see, and it's not really a downside because I think it's an easy fix, is when you take a look at the guide rails, and maybe you've picked up on it so far this video, is the adjustments are in 10-pound increments. So it goes 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so forth. Same thing on the other side. So that begs the question, what if I want to do 5-pound jumps? So if you want to do a 55-pound dumbbell, what you would do on one side is go to 50, on the other side, go to 60. And what that's going to do is basically give you one extra plate on one side, which, surprisingly enough, I thought that would be really awkward in the hand. Didn't really feel too awkward. You could beg to differ and say, no, it feels too awkward for me, but that's just one of the downsides of this current design as is. If you're just using this as it is, you will have one side that is slightly heavier. The only downside for me that I found, which I wasn't really considering because I'm a dumb meathead and don't think about this stuff all the time, is you could potentially put the handle in the opposite way when re-racking these, thus giving you one extra plate on one side versus the other. But if you pay attention and are not an idiot like myself, then that shouldn't ever be an issue. One of the other things I played around with is I actually have some micro gains plates, which are actually right here behind me. Look at that. Not even playing these videos, but just use B-roll for this as well. Microgains sells these little add-ons. These are their 1 1/4 set plates. So if I wanted to, there's enough room for me to get in here and basically put 1 1/4 inch plates on either side. And then I can then do 2.5 pound jumps as well. So if I wanted to do 22.5 pounds, I could do that. So there's a lot of versatility, but again, that would be an added cost. I just so happen to have these already, but a nice little hack because the handle here is big and girthy and allows for a lot of room, which I really like. And you can add on some extra weight in there as well. So end of the day, $1,700, expensive outside of context to me, but in context, very affordable when you consider what this offers in the footprint it offers compared to the alternative of fixed dumbbells, or even some of the comparable adjustables out there. Lifetime warranty, all steel construction. They are really nice if you have the budget and are in the market. This is just my first impressions after owning them for a couple of weeks. If I missed something specifically you were looking for, leave it in the comment section below and I'll either answer, well, I will answer your comment, but when I do a follow-up video, whenever I get around to that, I'll be sure to answer it in that video too. In the meantime, as always, thanks so much for watching and stay big.